Hey everybody, Mike and Hannah here with Delta Faucet. If you're watching this video, you probably just completed the installation of your Delta Classic 500 shower base. So let's get ready to finish off this project by installing the tile wall set.
If you haven't installed the shower base yet, check out one of those videos first. Also, before starting any plumbing related project, it's always a good idea to shut off the water supply. So do that before starting the installation.
Now before we get started, we want to make sure that you're watching the right video. So let's confirm a few things. First, take a look at your installation guide or your packaging to confirm which series you've selected. Now this video will cover the installation steps for the Delta Classic 500 48x34 tile shower wall set. But remember, the steps are exactly the same for the Delta Classic 500 36x36 and the Delta Classic 32x32 tile shower wall sets as well.
The size will affect your installation, so double check that packaging or installation guide. If you are installing the 60x32 tub wall set or shower wall set, don't worry, we have a different video for you. Finally, there are a lot of different options here on how to finish up this project, like adding doors or a shower curtain. If you decide to go the door route, take a look at the instructions for details on adding additional framing.
Now, if you're ready to install the tile shower wall set, let's get the disclaimers out of the way. Now this project isn't terribly difficult, but it does take a little bit of time to get through. And also, it's good to note that this is really a two-person job because there are certainly some steps along the way that are going to require an extra set of hands.
Also keep in mind that building codes are different everywhere. So if there is a task that seems a bit beyond your abilities, we definitely recommend contacting a professional. You can also make sure that you're comfortable with these steps by reviewing this video before fully diving in. One last thing to note. We'll be using a dual-purpose polymer adhesive and sealant for our install. However, you can also use construction adhesive that's labeled safe for plastic and an advanced waterproof sealant.
Next, let's collect the tools and the supplies you're gonna need to complete this installation. You'll need a drill, some safety glasses, a caulk gun, some adhesive, some sealant, a tape measure, some gloves, a level, a carpenter's square, maybe some shims, a drop cloth, a pencil, a utility knife, some construction screws that are 2.5 inches long, 1.25 inch stainless or zinc plated truss head screws, a bit holder extension, a 3/16 of an inch drill bit, a driver bit, maybe some 2x4 and 2x6 lumber for some additional framing, and a hole saw. Okay, once you have all those tools and supplies collected, let's get going on the installation. Now the first step in the installation is going to be adding some additional pieces of blocking to our existing framing within our alcove here to help support the wall set. Now I do want to talk about the blocking for just a second. The material you can use is either 1x4 or 2x4 material. Now personally, I recommend using the 2x4 material because it gives you a little bit more width, which means a little bit more margin for error when securing this to your existing framing to make sure we're not splitting it and getting a good solid contact between the blocking and the framing itself. Second, we want to make sure we're installing all of our blocking flush with the existing framing. So when you secure these in place, just want to make sure we're paying special attention to ensure that the face of the blocking is sitting flush with the face of our existing framing. And then finally, the position of the blocking is extremely important, so just make sure you're paying close attention to those measurements. Now I'm going to start with the sidewall here. As I mentioned before, there's going to be two pieces of blocking on the sidewall in the middle stud bay. We're doing one up high and one down low. And again, these measurements are important. The two important measurements we need to remember are 17 inches. And again, we're gonna be measuring this off of the subfloor. So when you're putting your tape measure down, make sure you're not sitting on the bottom plate and that you're actually contacting the subfloor. Measuring up 17 inches and then making a reference line. Next, we're gonna come up a little bit higher and this upper piece of blocking is gonna be at 50 3/8 of an inch. So coming up again, making sure I'm still sitting on the subfloor and a reference line at 50 3/8 of an inch. Now that I have these two positions marked, I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side wall. Now, as I mentioned before, we're gonna be adding two pieces of blocking to the back wall of our alcove as well. Now the position of this blocking is slightly different. We're gonna be doing one piece of blocking in between each of the two middle stud bays here along the back wall. And the height's slightly different as well. This height is gonna be at 48 inches, again, measuring up off of the subfloor. So go ahead and measure that. And then you can see I've already added a couple reference lines here so I know right where to place that blocking. Once you've made all of your reference lines around your opening for those 6 pieces of blocking, take a moment to secure them into place, again, taking close care to make sure you're sitting flush with the existing framing, and then come on back and we'll move on to the next step. All right, now that we have our blocking installed, we can move on to installing our door nailers. Now what door nailers are is a little bit of additional framing material we're attaching to our alcove to help support a future shower door installation. So if technically you're not planning on installing a shower door, you could skip this step. However, I strongly recommend going ahead and doing it to help future-proof your installation. That way, if down the road you decide you wanted that shower door after all, you're all set to go. Now these door nailers are gonna be out of 2x6 material, and there's gonna be 2 per side, so 2 on the left and 2 on the right. Now just like with the blocking, there's gonna be some important measurements to remember. The first is that the height of the door nailer needs to be 69.5 inches. You can see I've gone ahead and pre-cut all 4 of my door nailers here. Second, the vertical and the horizontal position of where we attach these door nailers is also very important. So for the vertical measurement, we need to be measuring 5/8 of an inch off the flange of the shower pan. I'm gonna contact the top of the flange, not the deck, but the top of the shower flange here, and then make a reference line at 5/8 of an inch. I'm gonna do that for both sides. Now I know the vertical position of where I need to be attaching that door nailer to. Next is also a horizontal measurement. The way this door nailer is gonna work is we're gonna be attaching it to the back side of this stud here, and we need to make sure this horizontal measurement is correct as well. You can see on this door nailer, I've made a measurement at 2 3/16 of an inch off the face of my door nailer here. I've made a little mark at the top and also one at the bottom. So now, when I'm securing this into place, I can start at the bottom, make sure I'm holding the door nailer at the correct height. That's that 5/8 of an inch off the top of the flange. And then also keeping an eye on my horizontal mark there so I know exactly where to secure this into place. Once I've done the bottom, I'm gonna move my way up to the top, again, keeping an eye on the top mark, and then securing my first door nailer into place. Once I've got the first one in place, I'm gonna take my second one and sister it right to the back of the first, making sure it's even vertically and horizontally to the back of the first. Once that's done, I'm gonna do the same steps for the other side. So go ahead and get those door nailers cut, all your reference marks made, and let's secure them into place. Now that we have all of our blocking and our rough framing in place, we can move on to starting to dry fit our wall set within our alcove. Now right now we could dry fit our rear panel and our side panel here, but we can't dry fit our side panel that has the plumbing in it, because if we did, it would start coming in contact with our mixing valve here and not let us get an accurate fit on how everything's coming together. So the next thing we're gonna have to do is drill a hole to accommodate our mixing valve in the correct side panel. Now I can't stress this enough, we're gonna get one shot at getting this hole cut correctly, so it's really important we're taking accurate measurements and being very careful to make sure we're cutting that hole exactly where we wanna cut it. So to determine the center point of where we're gonna be cutting that hole, we're gonna be taking 2 measurements. The first is a vertical measurement, measuring off the deck of the shower up to the center of where that mixing valve is. So I'm gonna take my tape measure, and again, paying special attention to make sure that this time I'm measuring off the deck of the shower, and then making note of what that center point measurement is. Now that's gonna be the center point of my vertical measurement. Next, we're gonna be taking a horizontal measurement, and this is gonna be coming across from a point that's plumb even with the front of my shower pan here. So I'm gonna take my level, make sure it's contacting the shower pan down at the bottom, checking to make sure I'm plumb, which in this instance, I'm right on my door nailer here, and then taking my tape measure, measuring across to find out what that horizontal measurement is for the center point of that hole. Okay, now that I have those 2 measurements, I know exactly where I want to cut that hole is going to be at the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal measurement. Now the next thing we need to determine is the size of the hole we want to cut. And this is really going to depend on what type of mixing valve you're using. Now we just want to make sure we're choosing a hole that's large enough to accommodate the mixing valve, but not so large that it's going to cause a problem when you go to install your finish trim that you selected when finishing off the rest of your alcove. So just keep that in mind. And again, like I said before, we're going to get one shot at getting this hole correct. So I think it's a great idea to do a test run on a cardboard template that I've made out of my packing material, just to make sure I'm happy with not only the position of the hole, but also the size that I'm going to be cutting in my side panel. So I want to talk about the template just for a second here. You can see again, I've taken it out of my packing material here, and there's a few things that are important to note. First is we want to make sure that we have 2 straight and square edges. So I've got my front edge here that's perfectly straight, and also my bottom edge. And those are perfectly square to another. That means 90-degree angle in that bottom corner. I've also made a big arrow on the front of my template here, so I know which way is also the front, but also up on my template. And if you look down at the bottom there, I've made a tiny little notch to accommodate that water dam on the front edge of my shower pan. So once you've got your template ready to go, I'm gonna be transferring that vertical and that horizontal measurement onto my cardboard template to determine the center point of my hole, cutting the hole, and then we'll take the template and dry fit in our opening here to make sure we're happy with how everything's coming together. So take a moment to do that and then come back here and let's see how we did. Okay, so I've got my hole cut, my template, so let's dry fit the template now to see how we did. I'm gonna take my template again, making sure the arrow's pointing in the correct direction. I've got the front facing me. Next thing I'm checking is to make sure my template is sitting evenly along the bottom of my shower pan here, along the deck, and also that my front edge is even and plumb with the front edge of my shower pan. Once those two things look good, I'm gonna kind of step back and check my template, looking again to make sure I'm happy with the center position of the hole and also the size around the mixing valve, which for me is looking pretty good. So now I have really good confidence that I'm happy with the center point and the size of the hole we're gonna be drilling in the side panel. So again, make note of those measurements and let's move on to cutting the hole into our side panel.
All right, now it's time to transfer our measurements onto our side panel. So the first thing you want to check is to make sure you have the correct side panel. So for our installation, we're installing it on the left side. That's where our mixing valve is. So we want to make sure that we have the left panel. Now I know that this is the right one because it has this smooth edge right here. This side has the corner pieces. And I know that this is the bottom edge because it's the shortest side with no flange on it. The last thing you want to check is to make sure that your side panel is facing up. All right, now this is where it's really helpful to have two people. So we're gonna grab a tape measure here and place it on the bottom lip of the side panel and then extend it all the way across to the opposite side. And now Mike is going to hold this tape measure level and get a bird's eye view to transfer that measurement down onto our side panel.
It is really important that we're holding this tape measure as level as possible when we do this to make sure we're getting the most accurate measurement possible and transferring it down to our side panel. So remembering those numbers we made note of previously for the vertical and horizontal measurements, I'm gonna be starting by measuring off the bottom. So this is my vertical measurement to the center of my mixing valve. And I'm gonna get my eye right above that location and then transfer it straight down onto my side panel. All right, so that's my vertical measurement. Next we're gonna do a horizontal measurement. All right, so making sure I'm holding my tape measure tight to the front edge of my panel and holding it level. Hand is gonna get up above it and transfer that horizontal measurement to the center of our mixing valve onto our panel. All right, perfect. Now, you'll notice here that our two measurements aren't intersecting and we need to find that middle point. So what we have to do here is we can't do our vertical measurement coming up over this footrest because you can see there's no way for us to hold this tape measure level. So what we're gonna do is actually use our carpenter's square. I'm gonna hold it tight against the front edge of my panel here, find that vertical measurement, and then bring it straight across to intersect it with my horizontal measurement. Now I'm very confident that I have the correct vertical and horizontal measurements to determine the center point of where we're gonna be cutting that hole for the mixing valve. Now I wanna talk about cutting this hole just for a second before you go ahead and do it. First off, again, we're only gonna get one shot at this, so if you need to double check your measurements, please do so now. And second, I think it's a great idea to go ahead and drill a small pilot hole right in the middle here at this location, because if you're using a hole saw, when you go ahead and drill that to cut your side panel, it'll make sure everything stays that much more centered to ensure we're getting a perfect cut on our side panel. So, with all that in mind, let's go ahead and take a moment to cut your side panel, and then we'll be ready to move on to dry fitting our panels in our alcove.
Next, we're gonna dry fit our panels in place. So as you can see, we already have our back panel and one of our side panels in. And a quick tip on this back panel, we find it's easiest if when you go to install it, you guide in the corner closest to the plumbing and then swing the other side in. Now, if you have a plaster guard on that looks like it might get in the way, now is the time to remove it and discard it. So we're gonna go ahead and take ours off.
Okay, now that we have that plaster guard out of the way, we can dry fit our last side panel here. Now I do want to point out, when you're doing this, you'll see the side panel has kind of this channel along the back edge of it that's going to snap together and correspond with the channel on the back wall panel. So if you're ready, I'm going to grab this guy. Kind of hold it at a little bit of an angle so I can fit those two channels together between the side panel and the back channel. And then swing it, making sure I'm staying clear of my mixing valve here, tight against the framing of the wall. And now the last thing we'll have to do is, you'll see I need to give it just a little bit of a push to snap the two panels together. Okay, great. Now we have all 3 panels dry fit into our alcove, so it's time to start checking for some final alignment. The things I'm specifically looking for are making sure first that my side panel and my back panel are sitting tightly together and they're snapped fully together on both sides, all the way from the top to the bottom. Next, I'm checking all 3 panels to make sure I'm getting good contact between the panel and the deck of my shower here, which everything looks like it's sitting nice and flush. And then finally, I'm gonna check around the outside along the top, making sure the panels are sitting evenly in the corners, and also the front edge of my side panels is sitting nice and flush with the front edge of my shower pan here. All right, everything's looking great, so the last thing I wanna check is also that size and the position of the hole I cut for my mixing valve, just making sure I'm happy with where it's located, which everything's looking pretty good. So we feel good about the alignment of our dry fit with our side panels.
Once you make sure your alignment is correct, we're gonna go ahead and make some reference marks. So you're gonna grab a pencil, we're gonna come in here, and we're gonna make a reference mark at the top of the flange on each one of our stud locations in our entire alcove. We are also gonna make a reference mark for our pilot holes, and that'll go on the actual flange itself, in the middle of it, again at each one of our stud locations.
As Hannah's going around the alcove and making those marks, we're also gonna be marking some pilot hole locations along each of the front flanges of our side panels. So to do this, I'm gonna take my pencil and I'm gonna make my first pilot hole location right up at the middle of that front flange at the top. I'm gonna mark one down towards the bottom in the middle. And then I'm gonna mark my third location in the middle of the panel. After that's done, I'm gonna split the difference between my middle and my bottom mark, right there. And then from my middle to my top mark, again, splitting the difference and making my final pilot hole location. So now I have 5 pilot hole locations marked on this one side panel. I'm gonna do the same steps for the opposite side. And once that's done, we'll have all of our pilot hole locations marked. We can pull all 3 panels back out of the opening, start drilling some pilot hole locations, and move on to some final installation steps.
Now it's time to drill our pilot holes. So we have one of our side panels up on sawhorses, and I have a drill here with a 3/16 inch drill bit. Now, if you have an extended bit holder, that would be helpful, but if you don't, you just wanna make sure that the spinning chuck of your drill doesn't damage your side panel. All right, so let's go ahead and drill a hole at each one of our reference marks that we made earlier.
Now that you have all of your pilot holes drilled, there's one last step we have to do to the side panel that has the plumbing in it. That's the one that we drilled the hole for the mixing valve in. You can see I've got that side panel here and I flipped it over, so this is the back that's facing up right now. It's got this fire retardant pad, that's that black square that has some adhesive on the back side. We're gonna be placing this directly over that mixing valve hole as centered as we can get it. So when you're ready, I'm gonna grab my pad here and remove the adhesive backing to expose the adhesive. And then as carefully as I can, I'm gonna place this centered over that mixing valve hole. Give it a little bit of pressure to make sure it's down tight. And next we need to cut out the hole itself. So I'm gonna use a utility knife here, and I find it's easiest to kind of make like an X in the middle of the hole and then work the way around. So I'm gonna go right to the middle, kind of make my X here. And then I can kind of grab each one of these triangles, slowly work my way around, removing the rest of that pad out of the hole. Okay, now I can throw the rest of this out, and this panel is all ready to be reinstalled once we prep the rest of our alcove.
All right, now it's time to apply our foam strip. So this is included in your packaging, and it's gonna be applied in both of our back corners, here right at the top of the flange. So before we apply this, you wanna make sure that that area is clean and dry so that this adheres well. All right, so we need to cut this in half. So I'm gonna fold it in half to find that center point. Grab a pair of scissors here. Go ahead and cut that in half. Now it has an adhesive backing on it, so we're gonna go ahead and peel that off. And now when we apply this, I'm gonna center it in the corner and again, apply it right along the top of the flange. Apply some pressure. just like that. Okay, now we're gonna repeat the same steps for the other corner. Now it's time to install our back panel. So to do that, we need to apply some adhesive to each one of our studs and the blocking on our back wall. So you can use a quality construction adhesive, or I have an advanced polymer hybrid sealant that'll act as both a sealant and adhesive. And you can tell that it's a hybrid if it says that it's safe for plastics and it does not clean up well with water. So we're gonna apply this about 4 inches down from each one of our reference marks, and you can just eyeball that. So we'll apply it 4 inches down from that mark on each one of our studs all the way to the bottom and on each one of our blocking pieces. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. We've got our back panel in place, and now we need to prep our side walls. So we're gonna use the same adhesive, again, 4 inches down from the reference mark that we made earlier, on each of our studs and also on each of our blocking pieces. So all the way to the bottom. Now, one little difference here on the side walls, this is technically a step that you would do if you're going to install shower doors. We recommend you go ahead and do it just to future-proof your install. That way, if you decide to install doors down the road, you're all good to go. So this step requires some sealant, and that's why I recommended a hybrid adhesive sealant. So we're gonna apply a bead of sealant in an L shape. So it's gonna go from the back of the flange right here, 2 inches out, I've made myself a reference mark, and then 3 inches from the top of the shower base out. So we have an L shape, 2 inches out, and then 3 inches down. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and make that sealant, apply the adhesive to both of our walls, and then we'll be ready to move on.
Now that we have our adhesive ready to go for our side panels, we can go ahead and snap them into place into the rear panel. I'm gonna hold it kind of at an angle here as I fit the side panel into the rear panel. I'm gonna swing this into place, keeping an eye on that adhesive along the front edge of my shower pan here. Okay, I've got the first panel in place. I'm just checking alignment to make sure I've got a good contact and those two panels have snapped together fully all the way from the top to the bottom. This side looks good, now we can do the other side. Same thing as before, holding it at a little bit of an angle, fitting the two panels together, then swinging it into place. All right, we have all three of our panels snapped together, so now it's time to check for some final alignment. Again, just like we did during the dry fit phase, I'm first checking to make sure that both my panels, the side panels and the rear panel, are all snapped together tight, all the way to the top to the bottom. Checking along the bottom here, making sure I'm getting good contact between all three panels and the deck of my shower. And then also checking alignment along the top, making sure my panels are lined up correctly, and then also the face of my side panels is even with the side of my shower pan here. And also, you can keep an eye up top on those reference lines that Hannah made earlier, making sure that the panels seem like they're sitting at the same location they were during the rough fit phase. Okay, everything's looking great, so now I can move on to securing our panels to our rough framing. Okay, now that we have our wall panels in place and we're happy with the final alignment, we can secure them to our rough framing in the alcove by securing them in place through those pilot hole locations that we drilled previously. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the screws we're going to use. We need to make sure we're using screws that are 1.25 inches long and that are truss head. Now the important thing here is making sure we're not using a flathead screw because that could cause some damage to the flange of our wall set when securing things into place. Second, on my drill, you'll notice I'm also going to be using an extended drill bit holder. Again, just like when we were drilling the pilot holes, that'll give me a little bit more clearance, making sure that the spinning chuck of my drill doesn't contact my wall set because that could cause a little bit of damage. And then finally, the important thing here is as we're securing everything in place, we want to make sure that we're maintaining the alignment of the wall panels and not pulling anything out of square or pulling any seams apart. So I'm going to have some shims here at the ready as well and be checking to make sure that as I'm securing my panels in place, nothing is getting pulled out of alignment. So for example, if you look on my back wall here, I'm getting great contact between the flange and the rough framing behind here along these middles. But when I come over to my corner here, I've got a little bit of a gap. So if I was to put a screw in there right now, you'll see it kind of wants to pull that seam apart on my wall set, which I want to avoid. If you run into any situation like this, we're going to use a shim, gently drop it back down behind to help close that gap, And now I can go ahead and insert that screw, and it'll keep all of my alignment of my wall set perfect as I secure it into place. Okay, with all that said, let's go ahead and take a moment to secure our wall set using those screws all the way around through each one of those pilot hole locations that we previously drilled. And once that's done, you can come back, score off any of the shims you may have used right at the top of the flange and snap them off. And that about wraps up this install. We have our wall set secured into place with all of those screws. We've scored and snapped off any shims we may have used, and we've let the adhesive cure according to the manufacturer's instructions.
The final step of this install will actually come after your walls are finished. You'll need to apply a bead of sealant all along the outside edge of your wall set. Now this wall set is great because you won't have to apply any sealant to the interior seams. All right, I think it looks great, and we hope this install went well for you.
As always, if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to the Delta Faucet customer service team. They're more than happy to help.